leading academicians and top-notch practitioners, dynamic lecturers, and fascinating opportunities for experiential learning, all at the heart of a world-class university, the city that never sleeps, and the business capital of the world. That's Columbia Business School, with Wall Street, Madison Avenue, and the entrepreneurial hotbed that is Manhattan, just a subway ride away. I'm thrilled to offer you today an opportunity to ask questions about Columbia Business School's MBA program. Emily French Thomas, the admissions director for Columbia Business School, is available to answer your questions during this AMA. Emily is the director, as I said, of admissions at Columbia Business School. Prior to joining the admissions team, she was the director of academic and student affairs for the executive MBA programs at Columbia and has worked in higher ed for 9 years. Emily has a BFA in theater from New York University and an MA in social organizational psychology from Teachers College, Columbia University. Now here's what we're planning for the next 15 minutes or so. Emily has prepared a short presentation. Following the presentation, she'll answer as many of your questions as she possibly can. You can post your questions at any time during the window during the webinar in the question window, and I'll choose those that have the most relevance and the broadest applicability to share with Emily and for her to answer. So you can start your posting your questions now in the question window, and Emily will start her presentation.
Okay, thank you, Linda. That really lovely introduction. If we go to the first slide.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
So I start any presentation I do with this photo because honestly, it's just my favorite photo of Columbia University. So I just think it's a beautiful photo of campus. But the reason I like it is really that I think it's a great snapshot of what Columbia Business School has to offer. And that is, it is an extraordinary, well-renowned research institution. It is one of the top academic institutions in the country, if not the world. And it is surrounded by New York City, which means that we are in the middle of a global hub. It's a global business hub. It's a global everything hub. So any industry that you're interested in is in New York. Any food you want to eat is in New York. You can find a neighborhood that feels good to you in New York. I mean, it's one of the most extraordinary places. I've lived here for 20 years, so I may be biased, but I think that just the access to people, the access to industry leaders is unparalleled. So, this is something that we really take seriously at Columbia Business School, and we make experiential learning the top priority, or one of the top priorities of the academic experience here. And I think that is something that really distinguishes us in the marketplace. The other thing that's incredible about that is we do bring in an extremely diverse and global community. And yes, you are in a nice big class. If you're coming in with the full-time MBA program, we bring in 550 students for the traditional August entry, and we bring in about 200 students for the January entry. And that sounds really big, but then we do break those classes down into what we call clusters of about 60 to 70 students each. And it makes it that's your kind of first community. That's your neighborhood, right? And these are people, again, who do not think like you. They are coming from all different industries. They're coming from different countries, different backgrounds. And everybody has a very different framework for thinking. So the thing I really want you to take away from this is that as we are looking for candidates, as we are building out the class, we are looking for people who are going to, one, be very excited about learning from each other and learning from people who are not like them. And two, who are going to bring something to the classroom where they're really bringing some level of expertise or some kind of extraordinary experience that they're able to share with their cohort. And it really does make a huge difference to the learning because, everybody comes in with the framework that you are used to. You are used to looking at the world. You are used to looking at business, at your functional job in a very specific way. And you are going to be exposed to people. You're going to meet people who think completely differently from you. And you're going to have to figure out how to work with them and how to create things with them. And it results in a much broader framework and a much bigger idea of how the world works and how businesses function than you would have when you come in. So that, to me, that is why you get an MBA. You are getting the MBA to become the leader that you want to be. Now, I want to touch briefly on the two options that I mentioned, the January entry and the August entry. I think most of you said that you were really interested in the August entry. That's a great path, especially if you are someone who needs that summer internship in order to make a big career jump. The January entry does not have that traditional summer internship. That said, most of our students, or many of our students, do in-semester internships, and that's something we see that is an advantage of being in New York. Again, if you have free time during your class week, you're not taking classes on Thursdays, for example, a lot of the time you can figure out an internship during that week. But January is really great for entrepreneurs, for people who are in family businesses, for folks who are sponsored by their company. They're going to work, they're going to do the MBA for 16 months, and then they're going to go back to their company, or for people who are making slightly smaller shifts in their career. The executive MBA is also a really great opportunity for folks who like where they are in their job and they want to keep working and, by the way, keep making money while they do the MBA. So it's, in some ways, it cuts out part of the opportunity cost of doing the MBA, and it's great for people who, again, are on the path that they really want to be on, but they're just trying to move to that next step. Okay, next slide. So again, I mentioned that you have access to all of New York, and what that means concretely for a lot of our students is that there is a lot of decisions that need to be made, and you are going to have the opportunity to take over, I think we have 347 electives at last count, which is more than most of our peer schools. We have an extraordinary number of electives in a wide range of industry and specialties, which means that you can do you. It also means that you need to have some sense for what is important to you when you come into the business school. It doesn't mean you have to have everything figured out, but you have to have some idea of what you will find valuable, what your gaps are, what your goals are, in order to really be successful here. And I think the students who are happiest, who really make the most of their time at Columbia, are students who are able to focus on, maybe they need to take their 5 courses they really need to take to make the next step in their career. And because they know that, they're also able to take a few things that they didn't expect, or to join a couple of clubs that they didn't really think about before they got to school. So you do have more flexibility when you are also more in touch with what you really want out of the experience. All right. I'm going very briefly with these because I do want to get to the questions, which I think is the juiciest part. But I do want to cover very briefly the application process. And it is a holistic process. I know that everybody says that, but it really is true. We are looking for people. We're not looking for people to compare with everybody else who comes from that country or everybody else who works in that industry. We are just looking for individuals. And we want to know that whatever you have done, that it is good. You have done a lot with what you've been given. So, of course, we're going to look at academics. We want to make sure that you will do well here academically. We're going to look at your professional experience, both in the context of what is it that you are bringing to class? What experiences do you have to help your colleagues learn as you are going through the program? And also, we want to make sure that you have some background so that you know what you want to do next, or you have at least an idea of what might be good for you next. And in the application, we do ask you about your short-term and your long-term goals. We even ask you about your dream job, and we do want you to be aspirational. But we're also inherently asking you, okay, given where you are, is this realistic? How are you going to get there? And how is the Columbia MBA going to help you get there? So our second essay question, and this is sort of an oldie but new one. We actually have our dean doing a video to ask you the question, which is a little bit of fun that we were having, but is a nice way to hear from him. The second question is about how are you going to take advantage of being at the school and being in New York? There's a lot that you can do here, so we want to have an idea that you really have done your research, that you really know the school and understand what is going to be important to you here, and also why Columbia is a good fit for you and for your goals. And then we also want to get to know you as people. So some people are going to bring extraordinary academics to the table. Some people are going to have amazing professional experience. And some people are going to just be amazing cheerleaders for their cohort, right? You're going to be the person who bonds the class together, and you have a lot of experience in teams or in clubs, and you're very engaged with the world. That is also something we want to see in our student population. So that's something we're looking for as well. Okay, next slide. So the structure of the application process in terms of deadlines, you see the deadlines here. We have something that's very different from a lot of other schools, which is called rolling admissions. Rolling admissions means we are, as soon as the application is open and we start seeing submissions, we're reading those applications and we're rendering decisions. We put the class together as we go. I love this personally because it means every time I read an application, I'm just focused on that one application. I can't compare it to all the other applications I'm getting. I can only compare you to yourself. So it's not about you competing with other applicants, it's about you being your best self. And me as the admissions officer, figuring out how are you going to fit in at Columbia and how are you going to fit in, especially as we get to the end of the cycle in the class as a whole. So January entry, folks, if you're interested in J-term, you will apply by August 3rd. The earlier you apply, obviously, the better, although for this particular group, we are still very much in the early days of the J-term application. So if you haven't put together your application yet, it's certainly not too late. Really target maybe the middle to third week of September is kind of a good time to make sure that you're getting that application in before the big rush, because of course, human nature, everybody waits till the deadline, right? Early decision is really for candidates. This is for the August entry. Early decision is for candidates who know for sure that Columbia is your #1 choice. It is where you want to be, and it is binding. So if you're applying early decision and you are admitted, then we ask you to withdraw your applications from other schools, and then your hours. We're excited to have you, and a lot of early decision candidates are those cheerleaders. We do see a lot of people who end up being what we call peer advisors, which are second years who do orientation for the first year class. We see a lot of early decision folks being club leaders. So it tends to be folks who've done a lot of research on the school, and they've probably been looking at Columbia for a little bit longer than the regular decision candidates, and they're in. They know that this is where they want to be. If you are not early decision, that is absolutely fine. Regular decision, the bulk of our class, honestly, is the regular decision folks. So if you're applying regular decision and you apply before the early decision deadline, the one thing I want you to know is we will read the early decision and the January entry applications first. So we don't start reading the regular decision applications until about November. But once we start, we will read them in the order in which they were submitted. The bulk of our applications do come for that August entry. The bulk of the applications come by January 4th, which is our fellowship deadline. So if you're thinking about rolling decision, which is really, it's a supply-demand problem. You have all the seats at the beginning and fewer seats at the end. You want to maybe target November, December as a really good sweet spot to apply before the big wave hits us in January. All right, and of course, we always take some people who are applying in April. It's we're happy to see those applications, but at that point there may be 30 amazing applications that come in on April 10th, and we can maybe accept 10 of those people. So we have to turn down some amazing people on the last day. So be a little bit earlier if you can be. All right, so that's my spiel. What questions do you have?
A lot of questions here. Okay, let's start. Okay. Harsh asks, apart from class size, student clubs, and location, what other factors, aspects should one look at to evaluate fit? All top schools are great. How do I understand whether Columbia is a good fit for me and vice versa?
Yep.
Question.
That is absolutely true, Harsh, and I think it's a good question to ask. I think that the best way to really understand if it's going to be a fit for you is to come and visit if you're able to. We have class visit opportunities, so you can actually sit in on a class and see, imagine yourself there on a day-to-day basis. We have something called student chats, which is where you can essentially do this AMA style format, but just with students with no admissions officers in the room. So you get that, the real deal from the people who live this and breathe this every day. I think the thing that is going to be different between all of these phenomenal schools is the people. And it's hard to quantify that or really describe that in words. Sometimes it's just a feeling you have. Sometimes it's about a particular program. If you really are interested in something like value investing, we're the place for value investing. If you're really interested in family business, we have an amazing family business program. Media and tech is another space where we are really leaders in those industries. But there are going to be a lot of different opportunities for you, and academically, you're right, a lot of schools are phenomenal. So it really is about feeling it out and understanding, these are the people I want to be around day to day.
Okay, great. Allison has a question. Beyond the in-semester internship that you mentioned, how have you seen students really take advantage of being in New York City?
Yeah, the other thing that I think is somewhat tradition at Columbia is the coffee chats that students have with alumni. So students, because you're in New York, we have a lot of alumni in New York, and there are over 3,000 corporate headquarters in New York. So you're going to have alumni pretty much at all of those businesses. It means that you can reach out to the alumni and cold call them essentially and say, hey, I see that you're a Columbia alum. I'm a Columbia student. I'm really interested in this company, or I have questions about this particular type of work. Would you be willing to sit with me for 15 minutes or 20 minutes and have coffee? And can I pick your brain about this essentially? Will you be a little bit of a resource as I do my research? And 9 times out of 10, the alumni say yes. And I know students who effectively got to know so many alumni in that more casual, easy way. It's a form of networking, but it doesn't feel transactional. It's not necessarily about getting a specific job. It's really about researching and learning about the profession and seeing if it's right for you or seeing if a business is the right fit for you. And because they've done that slowly over time, then when they do go in for the interview, they've already met half the people in the room. And that is going to make that a much easier interview than if you were to just go in there cold, having never met anybody at the company. So I think that's a big part of how Columbia students really leverage the network and leverage being in New York. And even for folks who want to move out of New York, I knew a student last year, he really wanted to work in Australia and he wanted to work at McKinsey. And so he reached out to the folks at McKinsey in New York, and they let him know when their Australian colleagues were coming to town, and he had coffee with them when they were in New York, because a lot of people will swing through New York whether they live here or not. As a result of that conversation, apparently McKinsey Australia does not usually have internships, but after they met the student, they decided maybe that year they would have an internship. Let him know. He was the only intern, and he has now moved to Australia post MBA and is working at McKinsey Australia. So, there are situations like that where it's really, again, it's kind of having a sense of what you want and being willing to ask for it. You've got all of the network, you've got all of the resources with our faculty and our executives and residents. They're just all the resources in the world for you are right here, but it's having that little bit of hustle and that willingness to really go after the things you want. And when students do that, they tend to be very successful.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is from Rahul. Does Columbia have an incubator program? Also, what does CBS have to offer for entrepreneurship aspiring candidates that sets it apart from other business schools? We're getting great questions.
I love that question because one of my favorite parts of the business school is the Lang Center, which is housed within the business school, and they have a range of things that they do. They help plan courses, and we have a large number of entrepreneurship courses, including the Greenhouse program, which really is for people who are starting a business. It is essentially a greenhouse. It's growing new plant of a business. But then we do, for the folks who just graduate, we have a startup lab, which is space, and it is resources like accountants and lawyers and things like that to really get your business up and running. There is also the Lang Fund, which is essentially seed investment for student business ventures, and you're able to go after the Lang Fund. So, and those are only a few things. There are additional resources in terms of courses, and then also the Columbia Venture Fund is the university-wide fund. So there's a ton of opportunities for folks who really want to do entrepreneurship here, and we do have some very successful entrepreneurs. I think in the last 10 years, we've had over 400 startups for Columbia Business School alumni, which is really great.
I attended, this is Linda, I attended a presentation on entrepreneurship at Columbia given by the head of the Entrepreneurship Center, I think it was. It was 2 years ago, wasn't it, Emily? She was fantastic. Yeah. She was fantastic. Was
that Sheena Iyengar?
I believe so. Was it?
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Okay, here's some more questions. We've got lots of questions coming in. Jennifer asks, wait, just jumped the screen, just jumped. Hold on a minute. Jennifer asks, can someone apply January entry and August entry at the same time if one is not sure which entry works better?
The short answer is no. We want you to decide which one you want to do and then apply to that. You know, every once in a very, very blue moon, someone may be on the wait list, and as admissions officers, we may look at their application and say, this is an amazing candidate, but this is not the appropriate program for them given their goals and their background. But generally speaking, you should really be doing that self-assessment, and it is tied to your career. So if you are looking to make a big change, if you're looking to go from, say, engineering to investment banking, that is something you can do, but you're going to need a summer internship to do it, right? So you need to make sure that you have done a little bit of groundwork, a little bit of research on your target industry, and have a sense for how people recruit for that industry and what that looks like. For things like investment banking, consulting, some of the bigger leadership rotational programs, if you don't come from those professions already, in order to break into those professions, you're really going to need that summer internship. For other things, you know, things like, say you're an investment banker and you're looking to do private equity, that's networking to get that private equity job. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get it if you are in either J-term or August entry, but you can certainly avail yourself of all of the opportunities either way. If you are interested in making a smaller step in your career where you're going from maybe one functional area but to another functional area but staying in the same industry, your background may speak for your ability to make that switch without having to have that traditional structured summer internship. So it depends on the kind of company you want to work for, and it depends a little bit on the kind of industry you want to go into in relation to your current job, your background.
Okay. Now, Keshav is asking a question here that I think is probably in the back of everybody's mind. And this Keshav asks, how can I maximize my chances of getting into Columbia Business School? What? Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. That's bottom line.
All right. Well, so here's a tip. And I think this is probably true of a lot of schools, but this is certainly true for us. The better you know that you are a good fit for Columbia, the more research you've done, the more specific programs and things you know you want to take advantage of, the better able you will be to convince us that you want to be here, right? So if you know it's a good fit for you and you're able to express that in the application, it'll make our job much easier when we're looking at you. You know, it's also good to do a little bit of an assessment and understand, okay, what are my strengths and weaknesses coming in? And we publish our class averages. So if you have, say, 1 year of work experience, you know, that might not be your strength. coming into the program, so make sure that you have other strengths that you're really pushing in the application. But, you know that you want to be here, and that helps us know that you will fit in well here.
And know why.
Yes.
Okay.
And be specific.
Right, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Matthew asks, can J-term students do study abroad?
Absolutely. So there are a bunch of different types of study abroad opportunities. And most of our students will take advantage of one of them. The main three are either a full semester study abroad. That's actually probably the lowest number of students doing that, because people get very attached to being here. And it's a little tricky to leave your cluster, your new 70 best friends and go to a different country. But that opportunity is there for you. What is more common, something called global immersion programs, which are elective courses where you are, for 6 weeks before you travel, you are actually taking a class about whatever it is you're going to study on that trip. And then you go for about a week to the location, and you are experiencing that location firsthand with corporate visits, with, potentially some type of consulting project. It just depends on the actual course. And they go to all sorts of different places like Cuba and Myanmar and, India and all kinds of amazing places through those trips. There's a really interesting one called Knowles, which is a leadership experience in Patagonia. And they actually, it's the act of hiking through Patagonia where they're really understanding how to motivate people and how to get people to do this. So really interesting types of programs you can do. Then another opportunity is something called the study tour. And the study tours are planned by students. We have 43% of our classes international, and sometimes we'll see students who really want to take their classmates back home with them and show off, their hometown. And our Chazen Institute, which is really our hub for all international experiences, will make sure that they also have a rich set of, company visits of speakers while they're there. So it is educational as well, but it is not a course, so you don't have to write a paper at the end or that sort of thing. And people, again, go all over the place. I think a really interesting one last year was Mongolia. They went to Norway. They went to South Korea. There are some really, really fun trips and interesting trips that they go on.
Sounds great. Thank you. I packed my bag. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Here's another question. This one was actually emailed in before the webinar. How do members of Green Business Club, especially members interested in sustainable consumer product businesses, benefit from being in New York? Very specific question, but.
That is a very specific question.
Yeah.
The real hub for, and this is for any social enterprise, is the.
Whoops, you cut out there. Emily, we don't hear you. Emily. Okay, let's give Emily a chance. Emily, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Okay, now I hear you. Now you can start the question. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Technology. We can talk about that later. No, what I was saying is the hub for social enterprise is the Tamer Center.
Okay.
And, the Tamer Center is a really incredible organization within the business school that focuses on a couple of different topics: social entrepreneurship, education, as well as sustainability and impact investing. And so we have students who are really focused on these diverse areas and looking into a variety of things. So, if you're in the Green Business Club and you're interested in starting, let's say you're interested in starting some sort of food packaging product that is environmentally friendly, right? There are actually a couple of alumni who've done things like that, and you'll find that there are a lot of resources through the Tamer Center to really not only understand kind of how nonprofits function, but then also our retail and luxury goods program is a great way to get a sense for the retail industry and understanding how to make what your product is marketable and to make it sustainable by being, to some degree, profitable, right? So there are going to be a lot of different and interesting ways that you can kind of put together courses to really suit that very specific interest that you have.
Okay. Harsh has another excellent question. Is it acceptable to share stories and narratives of personal struggles and tragedies? How do we draw the line between personal versus keeping it professional? Is there a limit to what should be shared?
So this is a hard one to answer because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it's about you, and to some degree, it's going to be about what you're comfortable with. I think what you feel we need to know in order to understand your path and to understand why this is a good fit for you and why you're passionate about studying what you're studying and coming to Columbia, I think you should share that. And we do want to get to know you. And I think, more importantly, when you are a student here, being a leader and being a student on campus isn't about just having the easy, superficial conversations. It's about having the deeper, more difficult conversations and getting comfortable with discomfort, right? That's what leadership is. And so bringing yourself and being able to bring your whole self to that is very valuable. Of course, if you are, I would say maybe think about how much detail you're sharing about specific things. If you're really drawing a very vivid picture for us that is maybe a little more about you trying to release information than it is about you trying to express yourself or let us know who you are, that's something to be cautious about. If you haven't processed something that's traumatic for yourself yet, the application may not be the place to do that.
Right.
So process first, but of course, if there was something tragic in your past that maybe even had an impact on something in your application, that is certainly information that you can share.
I think relevance to the questions posed, to your path to date, your reasons for wanting to attend Columbia would probably be a good criterion.
Yeah.
Agree with that?
I definitely agree with that. And I think it's about just know why you're telling us what you're telling us.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Allison asks, for the essay on short, long-term goals, to what extent do you suggest weaving in how a Columbia MBA will help you get there and drawing on your previous experience?
I would strongly recommend including how you think Columbia will help you get there. I think that's a great opportunity to show, you understand where you are now, you understand where you want to go, especially in the short term, and there's a reason why you're applying to business schools. So you know why, what your gaps are, why you need to make that jump or need to make that commitment to an MBA in order to make the jump to the next role. So expressing that and expressing how Columbia can help you do that, I think is very relevant in that essay. I wouldn't spend a ton of time on your past experience because I think we have your recommendations, and we'll also have your resume. So we know what you've done. So we don't need that whole story, but anything that's relevant in terms of why you're going after the thing you're going after and why you think you need the MBA, and specifically the Columbia MBA to do it, is all relevant in that essay.
Okay. Here we have a really good question from Akshara. Thank you for holding this session. What advice do you have for reapplicants? What should we focus on improving the most? Better define goals, better fit? What's your suggestion there?
Yeah, reapplicants, first of all, I want you to know that we really do love reapplicants. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but, we certainly do admit a lot of reapplicants to our class. Sometimes your initial application just wasn't at the right time for you, perhaps. Maybe you needed a little more experience or to better hone why you want to do the MBA, to better have a chance to really get to know Columbia's program and understand why you'd be a good fit here. So that can certainly help reapplicants. I think also, it's a great opportunity for us to see you again in the context of this year's class. So, If you were not accepted last year, perhaps it had to do with the timing of your actual application. Maybe you applied a little bit later in the cycle, or maybe just the way the class was shaping up, we weren't quite sure how you would fit in. But this year you might be the perfect candidate to fit into the class as we're building it. So I would be encouraging to reapplicants, just make sure the one essay that you're writing as a reapp is what has changed since your original application. So make sure that you do some assessment of your original application, especially in relation to our class profile, and you get a feel for where you might fit within that class profile and address it. You know, if you had something that was perhaps a weaker spot in your original application and you can identify what that is based on kind of what averages are in the class profile, then maybe say how you're going to strengthen that, or why you think that that's something that you have built or improved on since your last application.
Okay. We have a wonderful audience. I'm getting a lot of questions.
Good.
Okay. Aditya asks, what are the first 2 or 3 pieces of the entire application that the admissions committee looks at? And if different people look at different things, what are your first 3? That would be my question.
A lot of people in the office read in different ways. So this will not be true of the person necessarily true of the person who reads your application. But I like to look at, we can see when people have visited or had contact with us. I actually really like to look at that and just see, have you made an effort to get to know us? And just to be clear, we travel all over the world. We have folks in all kinds of different countries right now. August and September tend to be our heaviest travel season. So we are probably coming to a city near you if New York is too far for you to travel. But I like to see that people have made that effort. I also then just read the essays, because I think the essays are the way that I get to know students best. And, I look at the resume. The resume is a big factor, because I do want to see that you have some interesting work experience or some, very standard work experience. It doesn't have to be unusual to be interesting, right? But I like to see what you've done with the time you've had out of school.
Okay, great. A question here. What 3 adjectives would you use to describe the culture at CBS and why? That might make a great essay question someday,
Yeah. The one that jumps to mind is engaged. I think our students are very engaged and very committed to the groups that they are part of. So we have students who will join 10 clubs and be leaders in 3 of them, which, I kind of personally need a nap when I think about how much time that must take in addition to the studies and everything else that they're doing. But they are very engaged. They really care about their community. I don't know necessarily what the right adjective is, but pushing to really try and make things better for the next year. We have a lot of student-driven initiatives where students will be very serious about making sure that they understand the experience that other students are having. We actually have a group called CBS Reflects, which does this, and they study every year. They do a very big survey where they study how everybody's feeling, what the student experience is on a lot of different levels, and then they have a big discussion about it. And it's what I mentioned briefly before about not shying away from those difficult conversations. I think our students are very brave. Maybe that's my 3rd adjective. But I think our students are very brave about engaging with some of those difficult conversations and making sure that they are really pushing each other to be open to each other, to be open and thoughtful about what's going on.
Okay. It's a question from Mark. What is the best way to offset a subpar undergraduate transcript? And there have been other similar questions, by the way.
Yeah. So in academics, there are really 2 pieces to the academic part of the application. One piece is going to be your undergraduate's transcript and any other transcripts that you have. And we will certainly look at the whole transcript. And, if you have some extenuating circumstance, this is where you could use the optional essay. It does not have to be an essay. You could just put a bullet point to say, hey, this happened when I was an undergrad, and this is why my GPA is a little subpar. You can't change your GPA, so, be comfortable with whatever it is, and just let us know maybe if you think it's lower than it otherwise would have been. Let us know what the situation was. The thing that counteracts that potentially is the test you take, and it can be either the GMAT or the GRE. We do not have a preference for either, although if you submit the GMAT, we will look at the GMAT. So that's something to know. But you know, if you feel that your undergrad GPA wasn't great and your GMAT's a little lower or your GRE is a little lower than you want it to be, you can retake. I always hesitate to, you know, recommending that people retake exams, but we are seeing candidates taking the exams a number of times, and people do. It's a muscle that you kind of build, so people do get better as they take it. That's kind of my only advice. And then at the end of the day, you're going to submit your application and we're going to look at the whole thing. So you have to, you know your weak spots, know your strengths. Obviously, you want more strengths than weak spots, but you know, it is what it is. I wouldn't worry too much about something that happened 5 or 6 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, here's another question. What are the differences between an August MBA and an executive MBA as far as school resources, teachers, locations are concerned? Now, Columbia also, I think, has 2 or 3 MBA, executive MBA programs, isn't it?
We actually have 5 executive MBA programs. Okay. Yep, we've got 31 flavors of how to get your MBA. The August entry program really is for people who need to have that experience where they're going to have a summer internship. The executive MBA program does not really offer a summer internship opportunity because it is for people who are working full time. And I don't know about your job, but in my job, I don't think I could take time off to do an internship. So that is going to be a big difference. Executive MBA students, in terms of the resources they have, all of the resources are there for them, including clubs, including community. How much they engage with it is going to depend a little bit on them as individuals and their time. So, for example, I knew someone who was an executive MBA student who joined the private equity club and helped actually organize the private equity conference several years ago. So, you know, that's one end of the spectrum where a student is very engaged and committed to the club. On the other end of the spectrum, a lot of MBA students might join the clubs, they get emails from the club, and then they select maybe 1 or 2 speakers to go to, but they're not necessarily taking as many leadership positions because for them, you know, they're already in management fields. That leadership position may not be as relevant to them in their career at this point. So it sort of depends on the individual and the bandwidth that person has. But MBAs, from a community standpoint, MBAs have the same cluster. They have the same academic experience in terms of we have a core here, and all students take the core in the first couple of semesters. And then they have access to a number of electives. Now, again, for executive MBAs, we have 5 programs, 3 different formats. One is Friday, Saturday. One is primarily Saturdays. And the other format is modular. So roughly 1 week a month during the core. And then in electives, those folks can be on Friday, Saturday, on Saturday electives, or they can take what we call block week electives, which kind of match that modular format. It's just 1 week of elective. Because they are essentially doing the same academic rigor, but they're sort of squishing their program into the weekends, I think our MBAs are some of the most amazing people I've ever met. And they just have an incredible ability to expand time. I think I've heard MBAs say that it's the best skill they get when they leave, is they've just become so much more efficient in life because they know how to read their cases while they're, you know, at the gym and while they're on a plane and in the middle of the night when they have a new baby. So like there are all kinds of things that MBAs are amazing at doing. It is a little bit of a different experience, but I think, you know, given the opportunity costs of leaving work for 16 months or 20 months, the MBA is a really amazing opportunity. And we bring in about almost 400 executive MBAs a year. So it is a popular opportunity as well.
Okay, that's great. Now I just got, apparently there's somebody listening who for some reason can't see the screen or post questions. I'm not quite sure why, but she writes, in terms of the letters of recommendations, if I'm a person who works for myself, and apparently she's a solopreneur. Who are the best people to ask to write me a recommendation?
Yeah. For anyone who's an entrepreneur, or even if you're in a family business, you don't necessarily want your mom to write your letter of recommendation. She might be biased. Right. You can find people like
your grandmother.
Right. Exactly. There you go. You can find people who are clients. You can find people who maybe were funders for your business. So, the folks who actually gave you the seed money or the venture capital to start your company. But I think clients is probably the most common. Essentially, for a recommendation, you want it to be somebody who has some type of evaluative experience with you. So they've been able to evaluate your work and are able to talk about it. They know you well. Not too well like your mom, but like they know you as a work colleague well, and they're able to speak to your strengths and areas for improvement. And there's somebody who's actually willing to sit down and write the recommendation themselves. That's also very important. But it does not have to necessarily be your boss. A lot of the time it will be your boss, but especially in a situation where you're an entrepreneur or you have your own business, obviously that's tough.
Right. Okay. Here's a question from Param. He is currently in college and he wants to apply to, he has two questions really. Is it wise to apply right after college with only internship but no full-time work experience? And I think the better question is, what advice do you have for undergraduate students? And let's broaden it a little bit. Let's remember that I think it's 22% of the people who responded to the polls at the beginning said they are planning to apply for 2020 or later application cycles. What advice would you have for them? So I've kind of taken Param's question and broadened it a bit.
Yeah. So I have two answers for this, because the traditional answer has generally been that we would encourage you to get a little bit of work experience before doing the MBA, because having that work experience means you have more to bring into the class with you, and it also means that you have a better sense of what you really want to do in life. You've had that ability to try things out. So once you get to campus, you're able to really take advantage of all of the different opportunities that are here. My second answer to this question, this is kind of a big reveal actually, we are starting a deferred admission program for folks who are in undergrad. So this is something that our team is working on currently, and we're hoping to launch this year. So Param, if you are currently a senior, you're about to be a senior in college, you could apply as a senior in college, be admitted to Columbia, then you would go and work for between 2 and 5 years out in the world, getting that wonderful experience to bring into the classroom, and also trying some things, knowing that in your back pocket is a Columbia MBA admission, right? And then once you're ready, between 2 and 5 years after you apply, then you would come to Columbia and matriculate as a student and actually be able to get your MBA here. So for us, it's a phenomenal way to really reach deeper into the pipeline and get to know people even a little bit earlier in the process of figuring out life and figuring out careers. And we're really excited about this. So you guys heard it just about first.
That's great. When do you think, like it'll be on the site, or will they be using the same application, let's say, as this year's applicants, so they can start working on it? Or are you going to suggest that they apply, let's say, after the January 6th deadline so that you can have the first semester grades from the senior year?
Yeah, so they're actually going to have a different application schedule.
Okay.
The application won't be due until April. So, and it's not the application itself, we wouldn't recommend submitting it until, I'm not sure the exact date when it's going to open up, but it's going to be in the spring. So you'll have all fall to kind of figure things out, and we will post much more information about this on our website, and we'll send more information around probably in mid-September.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what else was I going to ask you about this? Sounds great. What what about people who don't have full-time work experience, but maybe went straight from a bachelor's to a master's? Would those people also be included in this program, or do you know yet? Sounds like that the applicants have time to figure it out, and you might have time to figure it out also, but that's a question
that might be. Yeah, that might be a more detailed question that I'm actually able to answer at this point.
Okay, fine. Fine.
Yeah, but I can tell you that the focus is primarily on undergrads. One of the great things about this is also that, we already waive the application fee for matriculated students. So if you're applying as an undergrad while you're a matriculated student, it's also low risk.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay.
So
sounds good.
Good for that.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Let's see. What else do we have here in terms of question? Okay. Does legacy, i.e. having family members graduate from Columbia, CBS, actually matter for admissions?
Not really. I mean, of course, if somebody is just so excited to be at Columbia and, they've known since they were a small child, that person is probably going to have more information about the school and really understand why they're a good fit. So in that sense, it's kind of that well-researched person is going to be a well-researched person no matter where that research came from. We love our alumni, and we certainly take seriously if an alum or a current student says that they think someone would make a great community member. That's nice information for us to have, but that's only, there are so many facts in your application that's not going to make a measurable difference, aside from what it does in terms of your ability to really know the school.
Yeah, that would, I think, be a major benefit. Yeah. Let's see. Another LOR question, letter recommendation question. How much extra weight do you put on a recommendation letter from someone who has an MBA? Does it make sense to choose a recommender because of that reason?
Nope. No.
That's an easy answer.
No, the recommender, the most important thing is that they know you well. Because sort of similarly, I get questions about, should I try to get my recommendation from my CEO as opposed to my boss? And the answer to that is generally speaking, no, unless your CEO really knows you well and can speak to your skills. But, you want someone who knows you well, who can really speak to your strengths and your room for growth. You want someone who has the time and the bandwidth to really write the recommendation and really talk about you. I think the only thing that I would say is a rule to follow is it should not be someone who reports to you. So there shouldn't be a conflict of interest, but someone that you have reported to would certainly work well.
Right. I'm sending in the chat window a link to a blog post that I wrote called "The President of the United States wrote your letter of recommendation," and this is my view on the topic, but I had some fun with that post. Okay. Here is actually one of our consultants is a former admissions director, and she did receive a letter of recommendation from a former president. So it got passed around. I don't know if it had much influence. All right.
Yeah. As long as you've worked directly for that person and they know you well and they can talk about your strengths.
That's what's important. Right.
Doesn't matter who it is.
Right. Okay. Here's a question from Oscar. Do you guys look at alternative transcripts, for example, CFA, HBX Core, when making admissions decisions? Or I would add, this is Linda now, classes that were taken post baccalaureate.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we'll look at anything you send us. We will weight things a little bit differently. So your undergraduate experience or any subsequent degree experience, like a master's or a PhD, those are all going to be a closer representation of who you are as a student than, say, an HBX course that you did while working. That also has value, and it certainly could show your expertise or your ability in that specific area. So I would say submit it. I mean, knowing that you've done a CFA, especially if you have specific goals that are related to having done the CFA, that's certainly nice to know. So I would say submit it. We will certainly look at it.
Okay.
It's not going to, don't submit that instead of your actual, your degree transcript. But
all right. Now it's now 11 o'clock here in Los Angeles. It's 2 o'clock where Emily is. Emily, we still have some questions. We have actually still a lot of questions. Do you want to extend for a little bit and get through a few more, or are you out of time?
Sure.
Okay.
No, I can go for a few more questions.
Okay, let's go then. All right. Leonardo asks a specific question on an evaluation criteria. When evaluating academic strength, what weight do you place on a candidate's GPA versus GMAT, i.e. near perfect GPA in a STEM field and maybe a below average GMAT?
A near perfect GPA in a STEM field sounds pretty great. They sort of refer to slightly different things. Yeah. So a good predictor of how you will do just holistically in a school experience is your last school experience. That said, the GMAT or the GRE, there is validity testing that shows that people who do well on those tests will do well in business school. And I think part of that has to do with those quantitative tests, especially things like accounting and corporate finance that you'll take. In core, a lot of those are going to be somewhat exam-based. Neither really necessarily shows your leadership ability. So the only part of the GMAT that actually shows leadership is the integrated reasoning section, which isn't really part of your overall score. So we're looking for a lot of different things in the application, and different parts of your application will give us different information. No piece of your application is going to make or break the application. So there's going to need to be a lot of strength, and there can also be some weakness. It just depends on what it is. It also depends a little bit on what it is in the context of what you want to do. So there are some industries that will actually ask you for your GMAT or your GRE. And if you are looking to make a transition into one of those industries and you have a lower test score, that could impact how we look at the feasibility of your professional goal. So that's something to know as well.
Okay. Another question here. How do you view GMAT scores and retakes? This is from Priscilla. If someone has taken, say, 3 times and isn't reaching the average score, would you recommend retaking again or focusing on other parts of the application?
This is a hard question to answer without seeing your application. And part of that is what I just mentioned about what your professional goals are and kind of what you're looking to do. What I would say is this. One thing that is really very important in business is persistence. If you want to start a company, if you are looking to make a big transition in your career, you're going to need persistence. And retaking the GMAT is a sign of persistence. We actually, we really are quite proud of the people who, even if they didn't get the highest score, they really put in the time. Good for those people. They really put the work in. I also think it helps them a little bit in terms of you get, again, used to that test taking ability, because that's going to be a skill that will help you take the tests in the core of the class. Again, no one part of your application is going to make or break the application. It's more a question of how it all fits together and then how you fit in with the rest of the class. I can't say what that's all going to look like. And so I can't predict for you whether or not it's better for you to retake or not. I never love to encourage people to retake tests, but if that's your weak spot, or if you think you might have multiple weak spots and that's something that you can control by trying to redo it, maybe that is something you go for. But yeah, I don't know. It's a short answer to that question.
Can I add something here?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I did a whole webinar on who should retake the GMAT and not, and I just posted the link to it. But I would ask yourself a few questions. One is, what were your practice exam scores? If you've prepared for the exam 3 times and your final score was in the same range as your practice exam scores and you studied really hard, then that probably is just your score. That's my opinion. However, if you weren't able to study that hard and think you can up your prep, you think you can change something about your prep that could change the result, Or perhaps you were getting higher scores on your practice exam, and on the test day, maybe you were suffering from test anxiety. Maybe you had an upset stomach. Maybe there was a jackhammer going outside your room. Maybe there was something extenuating each time, which is a little hard to believe, but let's say that was. Then I would say try again. But and then the other factors that Emily mentioned, what are your long-term goals? How strong are you? How strong is the rest of your application? Those obviously also play into it. But those factors, in terms of, is there something you can change that is likely to change the outcome? I think that's a key question. If there's nothing that you can change, if you put forth your best effort, maybe you worked with a tutor, there were no extenuating circumstances, and you got basically the same scores each time, then it's time to move on. That would be my recommendation.
Great advice. Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Okay. Let's see. Hi, Emily. I'm from a tech product manager background, and my partner is from finance. CBS and NYC, or New York City, is best suited because of the different industries that the two of them will be working in. I will be applying in the early decision, while she will be applying later. How does Columbia look at couple applications?
So we look at them separately. Okay. So you each have to get in on your own merit. I think the only thing to know about that is we'll render your decision much earlier than we are rendering her decision, right. Which means that you will have to accept the offer before you know potentially whether she has been admitted or not. That said, we love having couples at school. Every year we have a few. It's a nice fun fact for the orientation. There's certainly nothing wrong with it. And if you're coming from far away, so you don't necessarily already live in New York, but are maybe moving from the West Coast or internationally, you could apply for housing together. So that's kind of a fun thing for couples to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure. Okay.
But yeah, no, we're not going to look at you really differently.
All right.
Yeah.
Here's a question. This is, I think, came up earlier also, but I haven't posted it yet. Is working at in an impactful role in a no-name investment bank better than working in as an average Joe in Goldman Sachs? I'm not sure there are any average Joes at Goldman Sachs, but I think you get the point of the question.
I get the point of the question, and my answer to you is going to be frustrating because the answer is I don't know. I think both could be very good depending on who you are and what's a good fit for you. So don't live your life in order to be admitted to any school.
Great advice.
Live your life, right? Do the jobs that are going to be most interesting to you. Stretch yourself, and if stretching yourself is having that more impactful role at the smaller company, absolutely do that. Brand name is not necessarily what it's about. What it's about is what you do with where you are and what you've been given the opportunity for, right? Okay. So you get opportunities. What are you going to do with them? That's what we care about.
Okay. How does the admissions committee look at job changes right before the application deadline?
It depends.
It depends.
You could just post the answer, it depends, and I could walk away and just finish up the rest of the questions with it depends. If you're changing a job very close to when you would be matriculating at school, one question I would have for you, again, living your life, why did you make the change? Does your boss know that you might be coming to business school? Are they supportive of that? I think, are you making the change because, again, it was an opportunity for you to do something that you weren't able to do at the old job? And is it something that is really a value add for your life and your goal attainment? Maybe you are actually making an effort to change fields or to move more toward what your ultimate goal is going to be. And that looks great, right? I think, or was there downsizing at your old job and you got this new job because you need a job for the next however long before you start school? That's also entirely legitimate. And that's, again, life happens. Big thing to remember, we in admissions are people. We understand life. I started working at Columbia right before the financial crisis hit. So you know, we've seen a lot, and we've seen our students go through a lot, and it's all in. I mean, life doesn't stop just because you're applying for an MBA or because you're getting an MBA. But I think when you talk about it in the application, you should maybe take a bullet point or so in the optional essay to explain why, or there's a portion of the application itself where it asks you why you left your last job, and you know, you can put in a sentence or two. You should know why you changed jobs so close to the application cycle.
I would also think it would depend, like if somebody changes jobs, let's say this summer, and is applying for the full-time MBA, which is going to start in a full year,
yeah,
that's going to look very different than if that same person changes jobs in March and applies in April.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's about why you're doing it, and does it actually make sense for you, and you know. Right. Are you working at a startup because you think you want to start a company post MBA? That's actually a really smart thing to do. So, you know, it depends. Right. Like everything, it depends.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Gladys, are there research programs on small and medium business development that MBA students can be a part of? If yes, how does it work?
That's another nice specific one.
Yeah.
There is a lot of research going on at the school all the time. Our faculty are amazing research faculty. About half of them are research faculty who are on the tenure track, and about half of our faculty are what we call adjunct practitioner faculty, which means they work out in the world, and then they come to Columbia for a couple of hours, a couple of times a week to teach a class with you, right? So a really amazing combination of different people. And the short answer is yes. I'm sure that there is an opportunity to potentially get exposed to or get a little bit involved with some of that research. It might be through an independent study with the faculty member. There are several different types of independent study, but one of them is field work, where you're essentially doing work for a faculty member or working with, part of the school, and that there is an academic component.
Okay, is everybody else here?
It's essentially a research project.
All right.
Can you hear me still?
I thought you cut out, but nobody else was complaining, so it might have just been me. Yeah. Okay. Now I hear you fine. I don't know.
Okay, good.
Okay, last question. Where was it? I just had it. Just had it here. Can you talk about the on-campus recruiting process from banking and investment firms? How can CBS students benefit from it?
Yeah, so just for the benefit of folks who don't necessarily know what an on-campus recruiting process is, there are two ways you get a job. One of them is how most people get a job. It's called an enterprise process, and that's where a company knows that one person is leaving, so they essentially are looking for one person to fill that role. That's enterprise. You do that through networking, you do that through working with the Career Management Center, you do that through working with the clubs, but that's kind of a one-off thing. Then there's something called on-campus recruiting, which is where organizations like big investment banks, consulting firms, again, it's those companies that really structure their recruiting process around knowing they're hiring so many associates or so many summer interns every single year, and they are coming to specific campuses in order to source those people. The Career Management Center runs that process. It is very rules bound. There are rules for the recruiters. They're not allowed to come to campus for the first month that you're here, so you have time to prepare and time to really get to know Columbia and be a student for a little bit. And then you will work with the career management folks, and they will help you tailor your pitch. They'll help to make sure that your resume is in good shape, that your story is in good shape, that you know how to network with the companies once they start coming to campus. Then the companies come to campus, and there will be interviews posted, and you actually will submit your resume and hope to be selected for one of those interviews by the company. So Columbia is a phenomenal institution. We do have a lot of amazing companies that do come to campus through on-campus recruiting. On-campus recruiting is also the way, again, if you have not worked in investment banking or consulting before, if those are your target industries, you are going to participate in the on-campus recruiting process because that is how they hire. And it's very structured. And we have an amazing career management center that also really helps you each step of the way. I also think our career management center is phenomenal because for the folks who are interested in jobs that are more appropriate for an enterprise search, say you want to work in education or you want something a little bit, not with a huge company, the career management folks will also help you lay out your plan so that you feel structured as well, so that you're not just swept into recruiting for consulting because it's what a bunch of your classmates are doing, but you actually have that that goal, and you've spoken with the Career Management Center advisors, so you know what you're really going for and how you're going to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thanks to all the attendees for their time, their attention, their questions, and thank you, Emily, for an outstanding presentation. And right now, I want to tell you there are a lot of thank yous coming in from various people. So those are for you. And and I want to ask the attendees, as you leave, please take a moment to complete our short survey. We really do value your feedback. You can review this webinar. It has been recorded early next week, and we'll also be sending you an email when it's available. Thank you again for coming. Best of luck with your applications. And thank you again, Emily.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, for hosting, and thanks everyone for attending.
Welcome. Take care.
You too.